The election of Jason Kenney as the next Premier of Alberta marks the end, or the beginning of the end, of Justin Trudeau's grand bargain, a national price on carbon in exchange for a pipeline. Jason Kenney has promised to fight the carbon tax. He's promised to cut off the oil supply to British Columbia if they stand in the way of the Trans Mountain pipeline. And that's not all. He's also planning to do lots of other things around equalization. So is Jason Kenney now the official opposition leader to Justin Trudeau, and what will his election mean for the next federal election? To find out, we are joined by an illustrious panel: former Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne, former NDP leader, now CTV commentator Tom Mulcair, former Industry and Heritage Minister under Stephen Harper, James Moore. Great to have all of you here. Happy Easter. Happy Passover, and I'm sure it's going to be a great weekend. Kathleen Wynne, let me start with you. What does the election of Jason Kenney mean for the battle over the carbon tax?
It means that the federal government needs to really hold the line on putting in place a plan that is going to allow Canada to continue to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to fight pollution, to fight climate change, because you've got now 3 or 4 provinces that have said, we're not going to play, we're not going to do that. In the case of Ontario, well, we're done. It's ridiculous. So it really puts a much greater burden on the federal government to put that plan in place that will allow us to play our global role and take up that responsibility to fight climate change.
James Moore, first order of business for Jason Kenney. He's going to go right after the carbon tax, going to join 6 other Conservative provinces, Doug Ford in Ontario, for example, and really make this a fundamental issue. What's your take on his impact?
Well, I think, Kathleen Wynne, with respect, if Justin Trudeau's strategy is to hold the line, I think that's political suicide, number one. Number two, it would do an enormous disservice to the issue of climate change that Justin Trudeau speaks so highly of in terms of a critical importance for this generation of leadership. And third, if he does hold the line and continues on in the way that he's doing, he frankly could be precipitating a national unity crisis. You have to accept reality on reality's terms. And the reality in this country is that Justin Trudeau's climate change plan that he's been pushing now for well over 3 years, approaching 4 years now, has lost support over time, not gained support over time, and the Canadian public are voting with their feet, and they are running away from Justin Trudeau and his plan.
All right, well, Tom, weigh in on that. Tom Mulcair. Jason Kenney said, all beginning on a conciliatory basis, but carbon tax, equalization, pipelines, he is going to become a national figure battling. Do you agree with James Moore's assessment?
Well, I think that Jason Kenney might have just handed Justin Trudeau an unexpected gift, because now he has an excuse for not meeting Canada's obligations under the Paris Accord. The real battle, of course, during the election was between Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau on the one hand, and John Horgan on the other. He spoke more about them than he did about the Premier, Madame Notley. So I think that the real battle, as it's going to line up now, is going to be with British Columbia. There's already a threat to pull the trigger on the legislation that the Notley government had put in place. The battle's not over, and I don't think that there's any clear path for Mr. Kenney to be able to force through his pipelines.
Okay, Kathleen Wynne, I'm intrigued by this national unity crisis. Go ahead.
Well, and I'm happy to weigh in on that, but I just want to remark that we are talking about this as a political issue, and I understand it. I absolutely understand that it is, but it is an existential issue. And so we can, James, we can talk about the rhetoric that's being used. We can talk about people's decisions to vote with their feet. But the fact is that people are concerned about climate change. We know that a vast majority of people in this, certainly in Ontario and across the country, are worried about climate change. And if we tell the truth as politicians about what is and is not possible, then I think we can have a much more rational discussion. I don't think the discussion is rational now. I think that there's all sorts of obfuscation being thrown around, and people are not getting an honest assessment of what's really happening.
James Moore, just come back to this now. I'm intrigued by this. You say the national unity crisis. Some would say it's Jason Kenney that's stoking the coals of that. Jason Kenney's the one threatening to turn off the taps to BC. Jason Kenney's the one that says, even without constitutional authority, I want to reopen the equalization debate. He's the one that spent, I don't know, a decade. You were part of the government. The West wants in. It appears now he's talking about the West wants out. Why is Jason Kenney kind of playing with these very dangerous national unity questions?
Well, look, Jason Kenney put forward a very clear platform with over 70% turnout. He got more than 55% of the vote and got an overwhelming majority government. He has every right to assert in a confederation the province's right to have its place at the table. And I think Albertans for a very long time are sick and tired of seeing the government go out of its way to have auto bailouts for Ontario, to have bailouts for Bombardier in Quebec, for the federal government to go out of its way, lose the clerk, lose Jerry Butts, lose cabinet ministers, and go out of its way for SNC-Lavalin. Meanwhile, in the province of Alberta, not only do they not get pipelines built, they get the Northern Gateway pipeline stopped purely because of politics. They get carbon taxes imposed on them. And quite frankly, you have elite media, consensus media opinion in this country that sneers and rolls its eyes at people who don't believe that the carbon tax is the best and or only way to deal responsibly with the challenge of climate change.
I agree with Kathleen that climate change is an existential issue. And that's why, like many Canadians, I'm so bitterly disappointed, a little bit like the promise on democratic reform, that we haven't been able to meet our Paris Accord obligations. For the people who believed the idea that building more pipeline capacity was the way to reduce greenhouse gases, fine. Most people who can count knew that that was not true. On the question of whether or not it's okay to reopen the discussion on the formula for sending money from the federal government to the provinces, what we call equalization, nothing wrong with that. What is protected under the Constitution, Evan, is the very existence of this equalization idea, but the formula, the Colonel Sanders' secret recipe that you can never quite get all the details of, that's absolutely open to discussion. And indeed, if they choose to have one, to having a referendum in Alberta and any other province, and they can start the process of trying to change the Constitution on that. Nothing wrong with that.
James Moore, just last word to you, because you know Jason Kenney, you work with him, you guys were in cabinet together. I'm just intrigued, about his relationship with Justin Trudeau. He once said that Justin Trudeau has the intellectual depth of a finger bowl. So I don't know if there's any love lost there. How do you think that relationship between Jason Kenney, who knows federal politics as well or better than anybody, and now he's the Premier-elect of Alberta, how do you think the Trudeau-Kenney relationship will play out on the national stage?
I think that Jason Kenney understands the obligation that he has to be a partner within Canadian federalism. He is a federalist first. He believes in the ethos, frankly, of Peter Lougheed, where Peter Lougheed said, I am a proud and strong Albertan, but I am a Canadian first. And you saw that in Jason Kenney's speech. And whatever personal peaks he's had with Justin Trudeau in the past, Jason Kenney wants Canada to work. He wants Alberta to be respected. He wants Alberta to be prosperous, and he wants to work effectively in that regard. And, I think the door is open to work with Justin Trudeau, but Justin Trudeau, again, has to listen to clearly the majority of the provinces and the majority of Canadians who have rejected his climate plan. And if Premier Wynne is correct that Justin Trudeau and she and others believe that this is an existential crisis, and I believe climate change is real and we need to do something, then please tell me that the plan that Justin Trudeau has been failing at for 3.5 years isn't all they've got. They need to retool and come back to the table as well and come forward with something reasonable that reflects the democratic reality of what we saw in Alberta on election night.
Guys, I got to leave it there, but this is starting to sound like my Passover or Easter dinner, so this is going to be great. This is the kind of debate I like. James Moore, Tom Mulcair, Kathleen Wynne, happy Easter to all of your families. A great pleasure to have you here today.